Months away, the Chamber is thrilled to provide an opportunity for our members and guests to show their appreciation for his work representing our business community in D.C. since first being elected in 2004. As a tireless advocate supporting business-friendly legislation, Congressman Poe has been honored numerous times by the U.S. Chamber with their Spirit of Enterprise Award, which recognizes true champions for business at the federal level. So at that point, I'm going to go ahead and welcome you on up. Let's welcome our Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Y'all sit down. This is not the courthouse. You don't need to stand. But I really appreciate the chance to be here with you and talk to you a few minutes about things that are going on up in Washington, D.C. And yes, I pronounce Washington with an R, as all good Texans should. But I am finishing up my 7th term in Congress. And it doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it has. When I got elected in 2004, with the help of y'all here, all 4 of our kids were single. Now they're all married, and we have 12 grandkids. So that's what's happened in the last 14 years. And for you true Texans, yes, they all live in Texas. They were all born in Texas. That was one of the rules. When I did the weddings for my 4 kids, I made the son-in-laws promise me, not my daughter, but me, that they would live in Texas. And they have fulfilled that promise, and they all live in Texas, and their grandkids have all been born in our wonderful state. I have not always been in Congress. When I got out of college, my grandmother, who was the most influential person in my life, always told me, didn't encourage me, she told me to be in some form of public service. So I followed her advice, and I started my hand at teaching school. I found that was too hard, so I went to law school and became a lawyer. Spent some time in the Air Force after I graduated from law school at the U of H. Spent time at the district attorney's office, 8 years prosecuting cases. Met many of our law enforcement personnel, some that are here back in those days in the late 70s and 80s. And then in 81, I became a judge in Harris County and spent 22 years at the courthouse, or the Palace of Perjury, as I refer to it fondly, trying all kinds of cases, criminal cases. I resigned, ran for Congress, and now finishing up my term in the United States Congress. Let me mention a few things that are taking place in Washington that maybe you haven't heard about. Of course, Harvey is foremost on all of our minds. Congress actually did some positive things regarding Harvey. Didn't wait. Appropriated 3 bills. The last bill was $89 billion. That's just a number, but that is the most Congress has ever appropriated in any natural disaster in American history. And that $89 billion is not only for recovery, but a unique idea for preventing damage in the future, preventative measures. And that money technically is appropriated by Congress, and it goes through the governor's office. It's managed by the land office, and that's how the money will be spent throughout Texas. Some of you may know that the San Jacinto River right over here is now being dredged, and it will be dredged from Highway 59 all the way to Lake Houston Parkway Bridge. And eventually, the city will drain or dredge, hopefully, Lake Houston as well to make it deeper. You got all kinds of government entities involved in this. And those of you who are involved in Harvey recovery realize that you've got the federal government with the Corps of Engineers, You've got Harris County Flood Control District. You've got Harris County Commissioners Court. You've got the San Jacinto River Authority. And you've got the city of Houston and all the other cities like Humble, Texas, involved in all of this recovery. And we're trying to do what we can to get the money flow into the state and get it spent for mitigation in the future. Long-term plan was first designed and thought of back in 1939. The Corps of Engineers recommended in 1939 that there be a third reservoir, not just Addicks and Barker, but one more. But World War II came around and it never got built. And so maybe it's time to finally build a third reservoir and a fourth reservoir, the fourth one to protect the Kingwood, Humble area, the third one to protect downriver from the San Jacinto River. That's a long-term plan, and doing what we can to get that money spent, working especially through the state of Texas, and Dan is working on that issue as well. Here he is over here. I can't see because of the sun or the glare, and we will get that done as well. There is a lot of tension, some say, in Congress, but a lot of good things have been done and are getting done, and you don't hear about that. And you're not going to hear about it because we're not fussing and fighting and feuding, which is all that the press talks about, but other things are getting done. Good things are getting done to make things better in our country. And I think one of those, of course, is the tax bill that passed. Most Americans will see a $2,700 tax break that they will get back next year. That's the most. Some will get more than that, some a little bit less than that. But the tax bill is good. It's good for business, and the economy is growing because of that tax legislation. The federal government has brought in more revenue this year than any time ever in the history of the federal government. And part of that is because of the tax cuts. You get to be able to employ more people, and those people become taxpayers. And they pay taxes, and then it goes into our federal budget to be spent. And so there are good things that have happened. Just a couple of issues that I'm working on, and I'm not through working on these issues either. Based on the fact that I was in the criminal courthouse forever, I saw a lot of victims of crime. I keep up with some of those victims. They contact me from time to time. After you hear 25,000 felony cases, you meet a lot of people. And you meet defendants, but you also meet good people, victims of crime, whose lives were, torn apart because of what happened to them. And we have worked on some major trafficking legislation, anti-trafficking legislation that deals with that scourge of human slavery that is taking place in our country. It's the buying and selling of people, primarily women and children, on the marketplace of sex slavery taking place in this country. It's a phenomenon that is not new to the world, but it's come to the United States. And we've passed major legislation on bipartisan bills to protect victims of crime and treat them like victims as opposed to treat them like criminals, and go after the trafficker, but go after the buyer as well. That legislation I worked on with Carolyn Maloney. Carolyn Maloney is a New York liberal Democrat that talks funny, and Texas conservative Republican that she thinks talks real funny. And that's about as bipartisan as you can get. And legislation passed the House with only 3 dissenting votes out of 435, became law. President Obama signed that. I mentioned that because below what you hear in the volatile media, Congress is actually getting some things done. Now, I don't live in Washington. I live here. I commute every week. I've done that for 14 years, back and forth. My kids never wanted me to move to Washington because they said I'd come back talking funny. And they're right. So I commute back and forth from Washington, D.C., and live right across the river here in Atascocita. We've been in the same house for 43 years. A lot of changes during that time. And just a little bit of history. When I got elected to Congress, Mike Byers was president of the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know where Mike is now, but he was president of the Chamber of Commerce. The mayor, does anybody remember who the mayor was in 2004? Bill White, that's right, Bill White. I assume we forget. Addie Wiseman was the member of City Council that represented Kingwood. And our commissioner was Jerry Eversole. Y'all don't remember much. Wilson Archer was the mayor of Humble. It wasn't Hayden McKay. He was mayor for the previous 55 years before that. And Joe Crabb was the state representative of this area in 2004. We, just a few things that we've worked with the Chamber on. If you've driven down, I still call it Jotero, but it's Will Clayton Boulevard, and you're headed to the airport, you'll notice that there's some trees over there on the left side. Well, in 2006, we got an earmark, which I think earmarks are very important. Members of Congress need to decide how to spend money, that we appropriated money for the city of Houston and surrounding areas for landscaping, for trees. And those trees, some of those were planted in April, what was the date? January 2006, by the Chamber of Commerce. We were out there in the rain planting those trees, little bitty sprigs at the time. Those are just some of the trees. And you drive up and down our treeways, as I call them, that money came on appropriations bill, an earmark for the city of Houston that I sponsored. Glad to do that. $20 million to put trees on our freeways. Landscaping is part of the responsibility of the Transportation Department to make sure that most people spend their time on our roads and ought to be able to have some form of beautification, and it helps the environment as well. One thing that we're working on now, I used to represent Liberty County and Jefferson County. And then after redistricting, I represent now, it's a snake. You talk about gerrymandering, pull it up. And represent all the way from Crosby, North Harris County, winds around downtown Houston, all the way to Rice University. Heights, Montrose, some of the inner city areas as well. So it represented a lot of our area. I love being a member of Congress. I am the advocate for you. You don't go to Congress. Y'all all work for a living, so you can't go to Congress. And so I am the advocate for the people of our area. And I love doing that. And I spend a lot of time on the House floor. If any of you have no life and you watch C-SPAN, you will see that I'm down there on the House floor mixing it up as much as I can, advocating on behalf of you. And I love that. I like being the advocate for our area. And I'll continue to do that through the remainder of my term. One other issue I want to mention very briefly, because I'd rather hear from you and see what your questions are. Let me just tell the story and then maybe explain, help a little bit. We had a young girl, and she was a girl at the time, from Austin, Texas. I represent her, part of her family. She went to the University of Alabama. She was a sophomore at the University of Alabama. Her name is Megan Rondini. And while she was there, she was sexually assaulted as a sophomore. And she went to the police, and at that time, the Sheriff's Department really didn't do anything. In fact, they weren't going to prosecute the offender. Turned out the offender was from a real well-to-do family in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, a big contributor to the school. Anyway, they didn't do anything. She went to the hospital. The medical personnel botched the sexual assault case and actually lost the rape kit. And then she went to the university to get a counselor, and they didn't give her they gave her a counselor, but the counselor knew the perpetrator, and so the counselor wouldn't help her. So Megan, she was rejected by everybody, the school, the law enforcement, and the medical personnel there in Tuscaloosa. She went to SMU, transferred, and shortly after she transferred to SMU, she committed suicide. She took her life because of the rejection, the abandonment that she felt. 1 in 5 women who go to our universities, 1 in 5 will be sexually assaulted while in school during the 5-year period. 1 in 5. That's atrocious. 20%? Anyway, she committed suicide. So we had we got involved in what can we do on a federal level. And for you medical personnel, what we've done is introduce the Megan Rondini Act that requires that all universities and now all hospitals have a SAFE or a SANE available. SAFE, sexual assault forensic examiner, or a sexual assault forensic nurse examiner on staff are available for any of our students who go to our universities, or have one available. And we're also trying to get a victim advocate requirement as well under Title IX of the Civil Rights Act to make sure that we protect our students. So sexual assault on campus, that is what we're going to spend the rest of the term doing, along with many other things in the community. I am glad to see so many folks here that I've known a long time. I always have a great respect for law enforcement for a lot of reasons. But I like the Humble Police Department because it's been a while since the most prized material possession that I have on earth, my 1984 Jeep Renegade. It was stolen. Can you imagine somebody stealing my Jeep? And the Humble Police Department caught the culprit, and I got my Jeep back. That's the main thing. And so I'm always appreciative of that. And I have my Jeep with me in Washington, D.C. Some of you may know when I go to the White House, I usually just drive my Jeep over there and park it, if they'll let me, in front of the White House. I got to do that when George Bush was president. I just parked it in front of the White House. And I still have that. So I appreciate law enforcement and all the work that you've done. Same house. We've lived in the same house for 43 years, across the river. My wife is a retired school teacher from the Humble School District, 30 years, God bless her, teaching third graders. And so we love the community, seen it grown, and very proud to be your advocate, be your person in Washington, D.C. I get to represent the best people on earth right here in Harris County, Texas. One last thing for you folks in the school system. One of the best things I get to do is appoint some of our seniors to the academies. And I love doing that. And normally you get 3 appointments. You get one for the Military Academy at West Point, you get one for the Air Force Academy, and the Naval Academy. Well, since I've been in office, I have nominated about 300, and the academies have accepted the nomination for 104. So if you do the math, 14 years and 104, that doesn't, that's more than 3 a year. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I won't go into the technicalities of how we're able to get some from other members of Congress that don't use them, but it says a lot about the area that we live in, to have such quality of young men and women that want to go and serve in the United States military. And we get them from all the schools, but the Kingwood schools do a phenomenal job, and I don't mean just the Kingwood, the Humble Independent School District does a phenomenal job of raising our kids as patriots to go and fight for the rest of us. And so you'll see some of those. Now I've gotten to meet them across, when I'm on foreign affairs and I go overseas, I've met some of those graduates from West Point out there in Afghanistan or Iraq or at sea. I was on the USS Teddy Roosevelt, met a Naval Academy graduate that came from our area. He's serving aboard the Teddy Roosevelt. That's something you should be proud of as just living out here in the community, is the quality of young people that we have. I'm going to finish with this. I know I've rambled a little bit, but I'm going to finish with this. We sing the Star Spangled Banner. I'm sure you sing it, and you know it's a long song. The reason it's so long was because Francis Scott Key was a lawyer, and so that's why it's so long. It is. It's like 10 verses long. But the last stanza, last verse of the first stanza says, "Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?" You've all sang that before. But did you know that that's a question? Let me read it again. "Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave or the land of the free and the home of the brave? Question mark. It's a question. Does that flag still wave? And yes, it does. And regardless of what you may hear about all the tension and hostility, you know, it's still the best place on earth to live. Right here. And when I go to other places, people eventually will start talking about America. You know, everybody on earth wants to come to America. Have you ever thought of that? And we talk about the American dream. You don't talk about the Chinese dream or the Russian dream. It's the American dream people talk about. It's a little different here, and it's because of our heritage and the belief that we have in that word that's not trite of liberty. So the flag does wave, and it will continue to wave, but it's up to us to make sure that the next generation appreciates and honors the country as much as the rest of us do, so that we keep it flying, so that that question is always, yes, it does fly. It is the home of the free and the brave, and it will continue to be. Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to be here. Questions? Thank you. I can't see very well. Oh, there's one. Daryl.
Your Honor, do you have any thoughts regarding the conventions of states, and would it be advantageous for us?
The Constitution does provide for that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
And a constitutional convention of the states. I'm not sure that that would happen, but it certainly was put in there by our founders for situations where the states needed to get together and change things. So I don't know that it is going to happen. There's some talk, but there's been talk for a long time. Yes, sir.
2 years ago, Kim came by my shop and bought me a bracelet. And I have not had this bracelet off in 2 years. The first time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Now, 2 years ago in the Kingwood Parade on July the 4th, where's Kim? Where are you, Kim? Oh, she's over there. You moved. Let me say this also. I have the best staff, congressional staff, that there is. No doubt about it. You've worked with them and Kim, and she's just great. And Kennedy's here. I have 3 veterans on our Kingwood staff, and 2 of them are wounded warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan. So we love our military, but my staff is the best that there is, and Kim was one of those. But anyway, on July 4th at the Kingwood Parade, you ever been into to the Kingwood Parade? I was in it as a judge, and I didn't feel good, and I was going to the airport, fly to Washington. Kim said, "You need to go to the hospital. You look awful." But, you know, I rejected what she said, and I went on to Washington. And then I felt real bad when I got to Washington. Went to see a doctor. They took some tests. Finally, a bone marrow biopsy was taken, and I found out that I had leukemia. I couldn't even spell leukemia when I got it, you know. I didn't know what it was. But then I was there for a while, sent back here to MD Anderson, the best hospital, I think, in the area for what I needed to do, and went to the hospital there and saw Dr. Katarjan, and he took care of me and spent a lot of time in the hospital, a lot of time trying to get those numbers where they needed to be. But now, 2 years, I've been in remission, and the numbers are where they're supposed to be, and I take my chemo pills every day, and everything's fine. Good Lord's taking care of me, and I appreciate the bracelet. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir, Dan.
Congressman, thank you for first of all your service. And I'll never forget the first time I got elected to the school board. You were the first person to call me and congratulate me. So I try to follow you, being a gentleman, and appreciate everything you've done. Specifically, though, in 2011 we went down to City Hall and tried to meet with the mayor at the time, and said, "Hey, we got a lake that's dried out and we should dredge because we think this is going to be a catastrophe as we've gone forward. So could you talk about, when the Congress appropriated money to kind of fix where we're at, and the money that you think is coming to our community? Because I know it's $89 billion, but there was an appropriation, not a set aside necessarily for our area, but what money has been appropriated to go into our dredging programs and ongoing gates and things like that you would expect, you would want to see us do, because you went and fought for that money?
Okay, yes. In 2011, we had a drought. Y'all may remember that. Lake Houston, you could walk across it, literally walk across it. And we did. We did walk across it. So we went to the mayor and said, hey, Mayor, it's a great time to make this deeper because we may have a hurricane someday. Well, it didn't happen. And we had a hurricane. We had flooding. All of you know that. What I would like to see is 2 more reservoirs to hold, what are those for? To hold water back before it comes through our area. Because all the water in Texas eventually will go to the Gulf of Mexico, and it comes right through our area. And so we should understand that. And I would want to see the 2 reservoirs. I'd like to see Lake Houston dredged. I'd like to see, of course, the San Jacinto River dredged as well. Put floodgates on on Lake Houston so that can control the water, and work with Lake Conroe, because the city of Houston owns the water in Lake Conroe, and make sure that when the rains are coming and Noah starts coming down in his boat, that they open those gates at the same time we open the gates down here so that the water can pass through the area. That's what needs to be done. There was no coordination. We couldn't even find out who was in charge of all that during Harvey. Since I've been in Congress, we've been several hurricanes that I have had to deal with. Katrina, Rita, Humbert, Gustav, and Ike, and 2 tropical storms, plus Harvey. So it's probably going to rain again here, and we may have a hurricane or 2. And that's what we need to do. We need to be prepared. And then, of course, what I think we ought to do is not look at the water as a detriment, but as an asset, and store it, and then sell it. Everything west of Interstate 35, very shortly, will need water. Everything, everybody west of Interstate 35. They already have droughts in California. You read about it in the paper all the time. They don't have enough water. So, use it as a resource. Store it. Above ground, below ground, I don't know, and then sell it to those folks in West Texas. Long answer. I'll try to be short. Are there any more questions? Last one. Robert?
Quick comment. I want to thank your office for helping the school district working through our issues with FEMA. As most people in the room know, that we took on $100 million in damages, and we recovered about 1/3 of that so far. And I know that Dr. Fagan and Mike Sill reached out to you guys a few weeks ago and have already received a response. So I want to thank you for all your efforts for advocating for our school district as well.
Well, sure. And if you have hurricane-related issues, either personally or with your business, call us. We can help you walk through the bureaucratic red tape, no matter who you have to deal with, whether it's SBA or FEMA or the state or the federal government, the Corps of Engineers. We've got all their phone numbers. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Stay up here. Thank you so much. We have a gift for you. Casey, can you? Right over here. Drum roll. Nice.
Oh, chair.
That's for your retirement. Why don't you go have a seat? You want to try it out? Kim wants to get a picture of you with it in there. Oh yeah, here come all the paparazzi. Yeah. So what's really cool about that is when we ordered that, they also donated an identical one to a military family.